Okay, Cedar Mountain, S&T number 86 game. Another one of the great battles of the American Civil War, second incarnation perhaps, depending, because everything changed after TSS, really. I mean, you have TSS. Well, no, wait a minute. There was another soapbox that may have been earlier than these guys that was a little. I don't know enough to really talk about that. But there's this TSS is one game, and this is a significant modification. The series that came out, starting with Wilson's Creek, and it felt to me like they completely changed and reworked a lot of this stuff. Got rid of some of the things that were considered too finicky, but then, as in this one, hey, let's throw artillery overshoot into this one. That was a cool optional rule. Just tweaking and tinkering with the different aspects of the game, of the system itself within the optional rules, and within the exclusive rules for the game. Talking about components, I seem to have thrown my counters over here. I'm repositioning things because not everything fits in my P Ridge box. It was such a joy to play with the old counters again. I played Pleasant Hill last time out of this series, and that's got the TSR quality components. It also had a horrible map. This is perhaps the best map that I've seen out of this incarnation of the series. It really kind of shows, we have Simonson on this one? I think so. Yeah, Simonson's still doing the physical systems and graphics. And when you look at these later games of the SPI period, you see where SPI would have gone. And in a lot of ways, it's where Victory Games ended up going. They didn't bring Simonson with them, but they brought his ideas. TSR comes in, and they can't even understand. I mean, they must have had all the old materials present to see how this work should be done, what works, what looks good. And they bring people in to do what look like cartoony old TSR maps. They really look, so second or third rate. Very soon after this game, this is one of the, there's another year before this is up. Before TSR takes over. But yeah, that really shows this. So what about this? First of all, the system. I've discussed the system at length in the Wilson's Creek review. And I don't have a lot more to add there, except again, this is one of those cases where they decided to mix and match and take what should be core system ideas, like the artillery overshoot, and put them in this game, but not in others, for no great reason. One thing I want to say with this one, though, they get the brigade combat effectiveness right. It felt to me like the system said, there should be this, but we can't define it for everything, or maybe we don't have a really good grasp on it and we'll let people tweak and tinker. This one felt correct for most battles. This is the BCE rules I think I'd like to see, and I don't know if they did this with the second edition of Terrible Swift Sword, what they used for BCE rules there. But these would help a lot. It makes the units so incapable of fighting, really. The BCE rules in TSS weren't very powerful, and I may actually import these if I remember, if I get around to playing TSS again. I'm sure I will someday, but I've got other things much more on my mind. Other things that were in here, this is a fairly simple game in terms of what they added with the exclusive rules. There weren't a lot of special rules for this scenario, just the cornfields, really. And then stuff that had to be done. They got rid of rules saying, that's just too much of a pain in the ass for this battle. It didn't really factor in. For example, they got rid of one rule. The ammunition rules. Apparently there was always ammunition available in this battle. That has some interesting side effects. So even if you have plenty of wagons and are having to move them around and fiddle around with them and everything, even if you have plenty of ammo though, I've found that you're more cautious on the combat table, which is to say, in the normal, on your normal fire results table, you're always, all right, I got 5 points firing. I'll fire it all at one unit rather than throw a 1 point fire here. Although 1 points aren't terribly bad in this system, really. The magic number in this system seems to be the 7. Well, it seems to be fairly high. The 4 to 6 table though gets you better than a 50% chance of hitting, but the 1 to 3 table gets you a 50% chance of hitting. What I found is because the 1 to 3 table is kind of nice in this system, in terms of firepower points, that when there's no restriction on the amount of ammo that I have, when I cannot run out of ammo, I'm rolling on it all the time. I'm splitting my fire. So normally, units are maybe size 4 to 6, somewhere in there. Sometimes you have to split it into 2 fire because you're only allowed 4 points out of one hex side. Well, I'm finding myself taking a 3-point unit and splitting them into 3 1-point shots, assuming terrain's clear, because that table's not bad at all. The 1 to 3 table gets you the pins enough of the time that you kind of... It gets you a result that causes at least a morale check. Causes something. And you have to go really far up the table to start doing damage points, which I also kind of like. It feels a little bit... I haven't looked at the TSS tables, but it feels a little bit less violent than those, but more violent than the Stonewall tables, which came after, which were some attempt to correct the massive casualty levels you got in TSS. With this one, yeah, casualty levels felt high enough. I was going to say, with the BCE rules, you may not need that, but I think you still need that factoring in. You need that dulling down of the TSS system. And I'm actually considering taking these rules, sort of this whole system, verbatim, and moving it to TSS, grabbing a few things from TSS that I like, but not everything, right? Although I like things like artillery prolonged fires, just those cool little rolls. This one provided a really nice, simple scenario. It also provided a lack of the terrain. There's this terrain crowding in the other two magazine, Pea Ridge wasn't a magazine game, but in the other two that I was used to of this series, the Wilson's Creek Pea Ridge, they're so forested that it never feels like a battle's developing with lines that feel correct, And they're also kind of muddled situations, especially Wilson's Creek, which is basically an ambush. This battle feels a little bit more like sort of a proper Civil War battle. It's in the east, right? Instead of the west. Less forests, more cleared terrain. Cornfields are a cute little thing. The lack of countermix to handle them, or the lack of sufficient countermix to handle them, is kind of an annoyance. You could use blank counters, obviously. And probably better in a way if you use something that looks significantly different than the SBI counters, just because they get covered up underneath and they just look like strength point losses. I do have a big question about balance, though. I mean, I just kind of blundered into this with both sides, and the Union got trounced. And numerically, they're certainly well behind. I don't think they can stick around and fight. And those victory point hexes make it so that you have to kind of stick around and fight. The game has a very slender margin. It also, which is to say 20 points, I think, is the difference between loss and victory here. Strategic victory is 20 points difference. Well, with 4 2-point victory point hexes, let's say the Union can concentrate on one and hold it all game. That means they're going to be losing 2 points a turn over the course of, say, 13 turns. That's your 20 points and then some. Okay, it's not going to happen over 13 turns, but make it 11. All right. So go for half of them. Try to prevent it from scoring. I think I spread my Union forces out too much. They could not afford to be split up to that degree. They needed that support to hold each other. And in that sense, I think I did not play them terribly well. But if the Confederates already keeping you at even no matter what, and then you end up, being able to maybe push the Union a little bit at cost, and you start racking the 2 points per turn, I think a Confederate victory is likely that way too. So I think even with a much better played Union player, this is going to be a tough game for them to win. Certainly playing it the way I did, just saying, yeah, I want those victory point hexes. Because of the casualty chart and the low amount of, and yes, there's one on the back of the exclusive rules so you can photocopy if you don't have to walk 2 hours to get to a photocopy machine. Because of the amount of points that the Confederates give up for wrecked brigades, it's much, much more important, I think, for them to take care of their units, not to press too hard. And that can change the nature of things and maybe make it so that it stays an even battle. But spread out the way it was, where I was never facing concentrated fire from the Union that could, demolish a brigade. I only lost 2 brigades. Now, one of them was the biggest one in the game in terms of victory points, not in terms of strength points. If you can kind of pull a brigade back into, a defensive duty instead of pushing that attack for that extra victory point hex, you may choose to do that, and that would limit the scale of the amount of damage that you're doing, because you don't want to put early in the middle of a place where, maybe 3 Union brigades are going to be shooting him up. You want to get him out of there once he starts taking any damage at all, even though he's a big unit. All right. Well, he's not that big. I don't know. I don't know why Early's so valued here. His units aren't that good, and I think it's just to prevent him from attacking. And I used him to great effect, but he did break, and that was a painful effect, painful cause there. Somebody mentioned this would be a good starter scenario, and I think so. It's a little simpler than some of the others in this system. It has less special rules. It has clearer terrain, so it's easier to kind of. I just like the way it develops with that. One issue that every one of the games that I have in this scenario has or in this system has for me, maybe not so much Pleasant Hill is the least, and this one would be the next. The jumbled situation and maybe the small counter mix. I love the grandeur of your TSS, and it feels kind of weaker to have these small battles. And I feel the same way about the CWB system when I play some of the smaller battles on that. It's just, I want that big scope, and I want to see those huge lines going, even though that's at a different scale. But overall, this is kind of a neat one. I don't know if it's my favorite. I actually think I like Pleasant Hill's play better. It's just the components detract enough from it that this might actually, in fact, some of the others, the Wilson's Creek and Pea Ridge might actually be better than it for me in terms of overall experience, because, much as it may seem shallow, playing the game with nice components that look attractive is a big deal. And certainly you see that with any of the pre-TSR SBI stuff. Stretching all the way back, really. The design, maybe not all the way back, but certainly to Winter War and stuff like that. As long as Simonson's doing the designs, they're pretty nice, clean maps. Alright, up it goes.